The fog over Millhaven rose slowly, as if the town didn't want to wake up. Factory chimneys on the horizon were already smoking, reminding everyone that the working day had begun for many residents of this industrial town long before dawn. Thomas Bradley stood at the window of his office in the Millhaven Correctional Facility and watched the familiar scene. For 25 years, he had seen the same landscape every morning, and every time he thought about how little had changed over the years. The prison was located on the outskirts of town, a reminder that even in such quiet places, there were those who broke the law. Gray walls, barbed wire, watchtowers, all of this had become second nature to Thomas. At 52, he looked older than his age. Gray hair, deep wrinkles around his eyes, sloping shoulders. Working in the correctional system had left its mark on everyone who devoted their lives to it. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Captain James Walker, a middle-aged man with a military bearing, entered. "Good morning, boss. The night report is on your desk. No serious incidents, just Clark in Block C complaining about his health again." Thomas nodded, his eyes still fixed on the window. Damon Clark, 29 years old, serving time for drug trafficking, educated, charismatic, good with people. It was prisoners like him who often caused more trouble than outright psychopaths. They knew how to manipulate and find weak spots in the system. "What's wrong with him this time?" Thomas asked, finally turning to the captain. "He says he's not feeling well. He's asking to see a doctor. Dr. Garvey examined him last week and didn't find anything serious." Thomas grunted. Over the years, he had learned to distinguish real problems from prisoners' attempts to gain extra privileges or simply break up the prison routine. Clark was one of those who was always up to something. "Have Dr. Garvey examine him again, but keep him under close observation. I don't want him using the medical wing for his schemes." Walker nodded and headed for the exit, but Thomas stopped him. "James, how is Clark getting along with the other inmates?" "He keeps to himself. He reads a lot, writes letters. Sometimes he engages in philosophical discussions with those who are willing to listen to him. He's an educated guy, that's for sure. It's a shame he went down the wrong path." After the captain left, Thomas sat down at his desk and opened the night report. Standard inspection reports, minor disciplinary infractions, inmate complaints. Nothing unusual for a medium security prison. He was used to this routine. It calmed him. Order, discipline, predictability, that was what was missing in the rest of his life. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. A familiar name lit up the display. Emily. "Hi, Dad. How's work?" His daughter's voice always cheered him up. Emily was the only person worth living for after his wife died 7 years ago. Bright, kind, full of hope. The complete opposite of the world he spent his days in. "Everything's the same as usual, sweetheart. How's it going at the hospital?" "It was a tough shift. Lots of patients, 2 emergencies, but everything worked out. Listen, Dad, I won't be able to come home for dinner tonight. I'm on call until late." Thomas felt a familiar disappointment. Their dinners together were one of the few bright spots in his life. Emily had been working as a nurse at Millhaven Hospital for 3 years after graduating from nursing school. She could have found a job in a big city, but she preferred to stay close to her father. "Of course I understand. Work comes first. Just take care of yourself, okay?" "I will. I love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart." After talking to his daughter, Thomas felt better. Emily was his anchor in this world. Without her, he would have long since lost himself in the cynicism and despair that inevitably come to those who work with the worst of humanity. The rest of the morning was spent on routine tasks: a meeting with the administration, a tour of the blocks, a meeting with representatives of the state correctional department. Thomas was proud that his prison was considered one of the most effective in the region. Low recidivism rates, minimal incidents, good relations with local authorities. After lunch, he decided to personally walk around the blocks. It was his habit to show the inmates that the warden didn't just sit in his office, but knew what was going on in every corner of the facility. In Block C, he stopped near Damon Clark's cell. The inmate was sitting on his bunk reading a book. Hearing footsteps, he looked up. Clark was an attractive man, tall, slim, with intelligent dark eyes and a winning smile. It was people like him who often turned out to be the most dangerous criminals because they knew how to inspire trust. "Good afternoon, Mr. Bradley." Clark greeted him politely, putting down his book. "Clark, I hear you're complaining about your health again." "I'm just not feeling very well lately. Tired, headaches. Maybe something's wrong with my blood pressure." Thomas studied the prisoner's face closely. Clark did look pale, with dark circles under his eyes. But in prison, many inmates complained about their health, especially those who hoped to be released early on medical grounds. "Dr. Garvey will examine you. If there are any real problems, you'll get the treatment you need." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your concern for the well-being of the inmates." There was no sarcasm or flattery in Clark's voice. He spoke as if he were genuinely grateful. This alarmed Thomas more than open hostility. In the evening, as the workday was coming to an end, Thomas received another call from Emily. "Dad, sorry to bother you. Just wanted to let you know that I made an appointment with Dr. Harvey for a checkup tomorrow." Thomas was alarmed. Emily was rarely sick, and even more rarely complained about her health. "Is something wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" "Nothing serious. I've just been getting tired quickly lately, and sometimes I feel nauseous in the morning. Probably just working too hard. I want to get it checked out so you don't worry." "You're doing the right thing. Your health is the most important thing. Do you want me to take you to the doctor?" "No, Dad. I can manage. I just wanted you to know." After the conversation, Thomas felt uneasy. Emily had always been a healthy girl and rarely got sick. If she had decided to see a doctor, then something was really wrong. He tried to convince himself that it was just fatigue from work. Nurses worked in difficult conditions, especially in small hospitals, where there was always a shortage of staff. Thomas drove home lost in thought. His house was in a quiet neighborhood, 20 minutes drive from the prison. It was a small 2-story house with a garden, which he had bought right after getting married 26 years ago. After his wife's death, the house seemed too big and empty, but Thomas couldn't bring himself to sell it. Too many memories were tied to those walls. Silence greeted him in the house. Emily really was staying late at work more and more often. Thomas heated up some dinner and sat down in front of the TV, but he couldn't concentrate on the program. His thoughts kept returning to his daughter and her words about not feeling well. He remembered how he had lost his wife 7 years ago. The cancer had been discovered too late, and everything had happened so quickly. Thomas remembered every detail of those terrible months: the hospital corridors, the smell of medicine, the false hope that gave way to despair. He couldn't bear another loss. Emily was all he had left. Before going to bed, he called his daughter, but no one answered. Probably still on duty, he thought. In hospitals, there were often situations when staff couldn't be distracted by personal calls. Lying in bed, Thomas thought about his life. 25 years in the correctional system had taught him to be suspicious, cautious, and always expect the worst. These qualities helped him in his work, but made his personal life more difficult. He didn't know how to relax or simply enjoy the moment. Even in his relationship with his daughter, he was sometimes overly protective, trying to shield her from all possible dangers. As he fell asleep, Thomas had no idea that tomorrow would change his life forever, that the truth he was about to discover would destroy all his ideas about justice and force him to rethink the boundaries between good and evil. For now, it was just another ordinary day in the life of a prison warden who loved his daughter more than life itself. The morning began like thousands of other mornings in Thomas Bradley's life. Coffee, news, drive to work. But today, something seemed off. Maybe it was his concern for his daughter, or maybe it was that strange feeling that sometimes comes over people before important events, a premonition that life is about to change. Dr. Michael Garvey was waiting for him in his office. The doctor looked tired and preoccupied, which was unusual for this normally calm and collected man. Garvey worked in both the prison and the city hospital, which gave him a good understanding of both the inmates and the residents of Millhaven. "Good morning, Michael. You're early today. Is something wrong?" Dr. Garvey sat down in the chair opposite Thomas's desk and rubbed his temples. His face wore the grim expression of someone about to deliver bad news. "Tom, I need to talk to you. It's about your daughter." Thomas's heart skipped a beat. He knew that tone, knew that expression. Over the years working in the system, he had seen it many times when people were told bad news. "What's wrong with Emily? Was she at your office yesterday?" "Yes, she was. Tom, I'm very sorry, but the test results aren't very good." Thomas felt a chill spread through his body. Memories of his wife's illness came back with frightening clarity. "Tell me straight, Michael. What's wrong with her?" Dr. Garvey took a deep breath. "Emily has HIV, Tom, and based on the tests, the infection is relatively recent, possibly a few months ago." The world around Thomas stopped for a moment. He heard the doctor's words, but couldn't process them. HIV, his daughter, his pure, innocent daughter. "This is a mistake. Emily couldn't have..." I double-checked the results. Unfortunately, there is no mistake. Tom, I understand how shocking this is, but right now it's important to focus on treatment. With modern therapy, people with HIV can live full lives. Thomas stood up from the table and walked over to the window. His hands were shaking. 25 years of working with criminals, years of living in a world of violence and cruelty, but nothing had prepared him for this blow. How did she get infected? She's a nurse. She could have been pricked by an infected needle. Tom, I have to be honest with you. Based on the test results and symptoms, the infection was sexually transmitted. Thomas turned sharply to the doctor. "What are you saying?" Emily was seeing someone who was a carrier of the virus. Anger began to replace shock. Who dared to hurt his daughter? Who was this person who had ruined her life? "Did she tell you who it was?" Dr. Garvey shook his head. "She was in shock, just like you are now. She said she needed time to think things through." "Tom, you need to talk to her calmly. Don't pressure her or accuse her. Right now she needs support, not an interrogation." But Thomas wasn't listening anymore. His mind was filled with thoughts of revenge, of what he would do to the man who had infected his daughter. 25 years in the justice system had not been wasted. He knew how to find anyone, how to get the information he needed. After the doctor left, Thomas was alone in his office. He tried to collect his thoughts, but anger and despair prevented him from thinking clearly. Emily, his little girl who always saw the good in people, who helped the sick and suffering. How could someone hurt her like this? The phone rang. Emily. "Hi, Dad." His daughter's voice sounded quiet and tired. Thomas tried to pull himself together. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "I think Dr. Garvey already told you. About the tests." There was a long pause. Thomas didn't know what to say. "How do you talk to your daughter about things like this?" "Emily, I'm so sorry, but we'll get through this. Together." "I know, Dad, I just need some time. Can I stay home today? I took the day off work." "Of course. Do you want me to come over?" "No, don't. I want to be alone, to think." After the conversation, Thomas sat in his chair for a long time, staring into space. Then he took out his phone book and started calling. If Emily didn't want to talk, he would find out the truth by other means. He had connections at the hospital, the police, and various institutions in the city. Someone must know who his daughter was seeing. The first few calls led nowhere. Emily's colleagues at the hospital said she had always been very secretive about her personal life. No one could remember her ever dating anyone seriously. But on the fifth call, Thomas got a lead. The hospital's matron, a middle-aged woman named Dorothy, remembered something important. "Mr. Bradley, now that you mention it, I remember about 8 months ago, Emily used to get a lot of calls at work. Personal calls. She would always go off to the side and talk quietly. And then the calls stopped. Around the same time what, Dorothy?" "Well, when that guy was arrested, Clark, I think. I remember Emily was very upset then. She said she had headaches and took a few days off work." Thomas felt the blood drain from his veins. Clark, Damon Clark, the prisoner from his prison. "Dorothy, are you sure about the dates?" "Yes, I remember exactly because we had an inspection from the health department at the time. Emily was supposed to help prepare the paperwork, but she called in sick." Thomas hung up the phone with trembling hands. Clark, that charismatic criminal who knew how to get to people, who manipulated everyone around him. He had seduced his daughter and infected her with a deadly disease. The rage Thomas felt at that moment was stronger than anything he had ever felt in his entire life. Even when his wife was dying, He had not felt such burning hatred. Back then, there was sadness and despair, but not this all-consuming anger. He left the office and headed for Block C. The guards stepped aside when they saw the look on his face. Thomas stopped in front of Clark's cell. The prisoner was lying on his bunk reading a book, hearing footsteps. He looked up and smiled his usual welcoming smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Bradley. How are you?" Thomas stared at him for a long time without saying a word. This man had ruined his daughter's life. This handsome, educated, charming scoundrel had deceived a trusting girl and condemned her to a life of suffering. "Clark, how long have you known about your diagnosis?" The smile slowly faded from the prisoner's face. "What diagnosis, sir?" "Don't play games with me. HIV. How long have you known?" Clark turned pale. He sat down on the bunk and lowered his head. "A long time. 2 years, maybe more." "And you didn't tell anyone. You hid it from everyone you put at risk." "I was afraid. In prison, people with diagnoses like that are treated." "Shut up!" Thomas barked so loudly that the guards in the hallway flinched. He stood there, clenching his fists, trying to control himself. A little more, and he could have done something irreparable right then and there. "Mr. Bradley, I don't understand why you're so upset." "Emily. Emily Bradley. Do you remember that girl?" Clark's face changed. Now there was fear in his eyes. "Yes, I remember her. But we broke up before I was arrested. I never wanted to hurt her." "But you did. You infected her, you bastard. My daughter is dying because of you." Clark covered his face with his hands. "My God, I didn't know. I thought if we were careful, I really loved her, Mr. Bradley. She's the best person I ever knew." "Loved?" Thomas laughed bitterly. "You knew about your condition and you slept with her anyway. That's not love, that's murder." He turned and walked out of the cell, leaving Clark alone with the realization of what he had done. In his office, Thomas took out Clark's file and began studying it again. Damon Clark, 29 years old, college degree, English major, arrested 8 months ago for drug trafficking, unmarried, no children, no mention of HIV status in the file. Thomas understood that Clark had the right to hide his diagnosis. Prisoners with HIV were often ostracized even among criminals. But that right cost his daughter her health and possibly her life. That evening, he arrived home to Emily. His daughter met him at the door, her eyes red from crying. "Dad, I'm so ashamed." Thomas hugged her tightly, just as he had when she was a child and fell off her bike or had a fight with her friends. "You have nothing to blame yourself for, sweetheart. You're not to blame. But I should have known. I should have been more careful. Emily, look at me." Thomas took his daughter's face in his hands. "Did you meet with Damon Clark?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Did he know about his illness?" "I don't know. He never said anything. We'd only been dating for a few months. He was so special, smart, kind. He said he wanted to change his life." "When was he arrested?" "I was in shock. I couldn't believe he was dealing drugs. He seemed so honest." Thomas felt anger rising inside him again. Clark had not only infected his daughter, but he had also deceived her, made her believe his lies. "Emily, the most important thing now is your treatment. We'll find the best doctors. We'll fight this." "I know, Dad." Dr. Garvey explained everything about modern therapy to me, but living with this diagnosis is so scary. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about how Clark had ruined not only Emily's life, but his own as well. Now every day would be overshadowed by fear for his daughter, every test a sentence or a reprieve. By morning, he had a plan. Clark had to pay for what he had done, but not through the courts, not through the justice system that had allowed him to hide his diagnosis and avoid additional punishment. Thomas knew the prison system from the inside. He knew how to make a prisoner's life unbearable. He knew how to stage an accident that no one could prove. For the first time in 25 years of honest service, Thomas Bradley considered using his position for personal revenge. And the thought didn't scare him. On the contrary, it gave him a sense of purpose, something worth living for. The next few days passed in a blur. Thomas mechanically performed his duties, attended meetings, signed documents, but his mind was preoccupied with only one thing: revenge on Damon Clark. Every time he passed Block C, he felt a wave of rage rising inside him that was becoming increasingly difficult to control. Emily started antiretroviral therapy. Thomas took her to the best specialists in Columbus, spending all his savings on treatment. But he knew that no amount of money could bring his daughter back to her old life. She tried to hold on, working at the hospital. But Thomas could see how his little girl had changed. Her carefree nature had disappeared. Anxious wrinkles had appeared around her eyes. She had become quieter and smiled less. On Thursday morning, Detective Victoria Hayes from the county police walked into Thomas's office. Thomas knew her from working together, a smart, persistent woman of 38 who wasn't afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. She was investigating drug-related cases in the area and was interested in information about Clark's connections to other dealers. "Good morning, Thomas. Sorry to bother you without warning." "No problem, Victoria. Have a seat. What are you looking into?" The detective sat down in a chair and took out her notebook. "The Damon Clark case. We're trying to trace the entire drug supply chain in the region. He was one of the key links, but he's keeping quiet about his connections." Thomas nodded, trying to look professionally interested. "Yes, he's not very talkative. He keeps to himself and doesn't confide in anyone." "How is he behaving in custody? Is there anything that might help us get to him?" Thomas paused for a moment. He could tell her that Clark was hiding his HIV status, that it could be used as leverage. But then he would have to explain how he knew, and the truth about Emily could become public knowledge. "Nothing special. He reads, writes letters. Sometimes he complains about his health, but the doctor says he's faking it." Victoria looked at him intently. "Thomas, you look tired. Is everything okay?" "The usual problems. Work, you know." "How's Emily? I haven't seen her in a while." Thomas felt his heart tighten at the mention of his daughter. "She's undergoing treatment, health problems." "Nothing serious, I hope?" "We hope not." Victoria wrote something down in her notebook and stood up. "All right. If you remember anything about Clark, let me know. And take care of yourself, Thomas. If you need any help, don't hesitate to call." After the detective left, Thomas sat in a daze for a long time. Victoria had always been perceptive, and he wasn't sure he had been able to hide his state of mind. He needed to be more careful. In the afternoon, he received a call from Dr. Harvey. "Tom, I need to talk to you. It's important." "About what?" "We should meet. Can you come to my office?" Thomas found the doctor in the prison infirmary, studying the inmate's medical records. "What's wrong, Michael?" Dr. Garvey closed the folder and looked at Thomas seriously. "I've been looking into Clark's medical history. Tom, he knew about his HIV status before he was arrested. He has records from a private clinic in Columbus dating back a year and a half." "And what does that mean?" "It means he knowingly concealed his diagnosis when he was dating your daughter. Legally, that qualifies as intentional infliction of emotional distress." Thomas felt a flame of rage burning inside him. Can he be held liable? Technically, yes, but that would require Emily to testify, to talk about your relationship in public. Are you willing to put her through that? Thomas knew the doctor was right. A trial would mean publicity, notoriety, and additional stress for his daughter. And the outcome would be uncertain. Clark was already in prison, and an additional sentence would make little difference. "No, I'm not ready. Emily has suffered enough." Then there's only one thing left to do. Make sure he gets the treatment he needs and doesn't pose a danger to other inmates. After talking to the doctor, Thomas returned to his office and took out Clark's personal file. He studied every page, every detail of this man's life. Damon grew up in a broken home. His mother was a single mother working 2 jobs. He did well in school and received a scholarship to university. He studied literature and wrote poetry. It seemed he had every opportunity to lead an honest life. But something went wrong. After university, he couldn't find a job in his field and got by with odd jobs. Then drugs came along, first as a way to cope with depression, then as a source of income. A classic story of downfall. Thomas tried to find something in this story that could justify Clark, explain his actions, but he couldn't. A man who deliberately hides a terminal illness from his partner does not deserve sympathy. In the evening, he drove to Emily's house. His daughter met him in the kitchen, cooking dinner. She was trying to lead a normal life, but Thomas could see how hard it was for her. "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Fine. I worked, Then I went to the doctor. My test results are improving. That's good. How are you feeling? Emily stopped and looked at her father. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you angry with me for seeing him? Thomas hugged his daughter. Emily, I've never been angry with you. You're the victim in this story, not the culprit. But I should have been more careful. I should have insisted on the tests. You fell in love. That's normal. You trusted someone you should have trusted. He betrayed you. Emily began to cry, and Thomas hugged her again, feeling his hatred for Clark grow even stronger. This man had not only ruined his daughter's health, but also broken her spirit, making her blame herself for someone else's crime. Dad, what will happen to him? To Damon? He's serving his sentence. Justice will prevail. But he didn't know he was infected when we met. Thomas froze. Emily was still defending that bastard. Honey, he knew. Dr. Garvey found the records. Clark knew about his diagnosis before he even met you. Emily's face changed. There was something in her eyes that Thomas had never seen before. Cold rage. He knew, and he did it anyway? Yes, he knowingly put you at risk. Emily sat down on a chair, covering her face with her hands. So he never loved me. It was all a lie. Thomas sat down next to his daughter. I'll do everything I can to make him pay for what he did. How? Thomas didn't answer. He didn't know exactly how he would punish Clark yet, but he knew he would. The prison system offered many opportunities to make a prisoner's life unbearable. He could be transferred to a cell with aggressive inmates. Information about his diagnosis could be accidentally disclosed to other prisoners, or an accident could be staged during a walk or work. The next day, Thomas began to explore his options. He looked through the lists of inmates who might be suitable neighbors for Clark. He found several candidates, people with a history of violence who treated rats and sick people badly. But then, he thought about the consequences. If something happened to Clark, there would be an investigation. Detective Hayes had already shown interest in this inmate. Any changes in his treatment could arouse suspicion. A more subtle plan was needed. Thomas remembered Clark's complaints about his health. What if he used that? He could arrange treatment that would actually make him worse, or accidentally give him a medication he was allergic to. But that plan was risky too. Dr. Garvey was too conscientious to miss the tampering. By the end of the week, Thomas had come up with another plan, simpler and more cruel. On Saturday evening, he stayed late at the prison under the pretext of working on documents. There were fewer guards on the night shift, and they knew that the warden sometimes stayed late. No one was surprised to see him in the corridors after lights out. Thomas walked to Block C. Clark was asleep in his cell. Thomas stared at him through the bars for a long time, feeling hatred boiling inside him. This man had ruined his daughter's life and had to pay for it. But at the last moment, something stopped him. Perhaps it was his years of honest service. Or perhaps it was the realization that murder would make him just like the criminals he had been protecting. Thomas turned and walked away. But the decision had been made. Clark had to die. He just had to find the right way and the right moment. On Monday, Detective Hayes came to him again with questions. Thomas, I've noticed you've been staying late at the station a lot. Is everything okay? Lots of work, preparing reports for the department. And your daughter, how's she doing? Thomas tensed. Why was she asking about Emily again? Her treatment is going well. Why? Just worried. You and Emily have always been very close. If something serious happens to her, it could affect you greatly. Victoria spoke cautiously, but Thomas sensed the hidden meaning in her words. She suspected that his behavior was related to personal problems. Thanks for your concern, but everything is under control. Okay, one more question. Have you noticed anything unusual about Clark's behavior lately? No, nothing. What should I have noticed? His lawyer has filed a motion to review the case. He claims there are new circumstances that could affect the verdict. Thomas felt his heart skip a beat. If Clark's case was reviewed, he could be released early, and that would mean that justice would not prevail. What circumstances? It's not clear yet, but the lawyer is hinting at health problems with his client. There may be a motion for parole on health grounds. After the detective left, Thomas sat in his office, clenching his fists. Not only would Clark avoid additional punishment for infecting Emily, but he might also be released early. That was unacceptable. That evening, he called Emily. "Honey, how are you?" "I'm fine, Dad. Just tired." "Emily, I want you to know that I will do everything I can to make sure that whoever hurt you is punished." "Dad, you're scaring me." "What do you mean?" "Nothing special. I just want justice to be served." But Thomas already knew that justice in a courtroom and justice in his mind were two different things. And if the system didn't punish Clark properly, he would do it himself. 2 weeks had passed since Thomas learned of Clark's possible early release. He spent those 2 weeks planning meticulously. He studied the guard schedules, patrol routes, and blind spots in the video surveillance system. 25 years on the job had given him detailed knowledge of all the weak points in the prison's security. The plan had to be simple. The fewer variables, the less chance of error. Thomas decided to act during the night shift on Saturday. There were fewer guards on duty on weekends, and Dr. Garvey was only on call. On Thursday, Thomas received official notification that a hearing on Clark's lawyer's petition would take place on Monday. Time was running out. On Friday, he visited Emily. His daughter looked better than she had a few weeks ago. The treatment was helping, and the tests showed positive results. But Thomas could see that she was still reeling from the shock. "How's work?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee in his daughter's kitchen. "Fine. My colleagues are supportive, although I haven't told anyone the details. I just said I had health problems." "That's the right thing to do. No one needs to know your personal business." Emily sat down opposite her father. "Dad, have you thought about taking him to court for hiding his diagnosis?" Thomas shook his head. "A trial means publicity. Are you ready for the whole story to become public knowledge? For journalists digging into your personal life?" "Probably not, but he can't just get away with it." "He won't," Thomas said quietly. Something in his tone made Emily look at her father closely. "Dad, are you planning something?" "No, dear. I just believe in justice." Thomas spent Saturday at home, trying to act normal. He read the newspaper, watched TV, and called Emily. But inside, he felt increasingly tense. By evening, he felt a strange calmness, the kind that comes over people who have made a final decision. At 10 o'clock in the evening, Thomas arrived at the prison. The guard on duty, Mike Johnson, greeted him without surprise. The warden often stayed late on weekends. "Good evening, Mr. Bradley. Working late?" "I have to finish a report for the department. I don't have much time before Monday." "I see. Do you need anything?" "No, thank you. I'll just sit in my office." Thomas went to his office and turned on his computer. The video surveillance system data appeared on the screen. He studied the location of the cameras in Block C and the corridors. As planned, he found a blind spot near Clark's camera, a corner that was not visible to any of the cameras. At midnight, the guards began their rounds. Thomas knew their route by heart. He had a 20-minute window between checks in Block C. At 12:15, he left his office. The corridors were quiet, only the hum of the ventilation system breaking the silence. Thomas made his way to Block C, trying to stay in the blind spots of the cameras. He stopped near Clark's camera. The prisoner was asleep, turned toward the wall. Thomas took out his set of keys and quietly unlocked the door. The cell door creaked, and Clark woke up. He turned and saw a silhouette in the doorway. "Mr. Bradley? What's going on?" Thomas entered the cell and closed the door behind him. "Get up, Clark." The prisoner sat up on his bunk, rubbing his eyes. "Sir, it's midnight. What's going on?" "I came to talk to you about my daughter." There was something in Thomas's voice that made Clark fully awake. He got up from the bunk, instinctively backing toward the far wall of the cell. "Mr. Bradley, I know you're angry, but—" "Angry?" Thomas laughed coldly. "You think I'm angry? You ruined my daughter's life, and you think I'm just angry? I didn't mean to hurt her. I really loved Emily." "Loved her?" Thomas took a step forward. "You knew about your illness for a year and a half. You knew you could infect her, and you slept with her anyway." Clark pressed his back against the wall. "I thought if we were careful, I never wanted. You wanted it. You wanted what you wanted from her, and you didn't care about the consequences." Thomas took a small vial out of his pocket. In the dim light of the camera, Clark couldn't see what was inside. What is it? Insulin. A large dose of insulin. Clark turned pale. Mr. Bradley, you can't. It's murder. No, it's justice. You killed my daughter. Slowly. Painfully. Now it's my turn. Thomas took out the syringe and began to draw the liquid from the vial. Please don't. I can fix everything. I'll write a confession, tell everyone the truth. It's too late. Clark tried to break free and reach the door, but Thomas was bigger and stronger. He grabbed the prisoner by the arm and pinned him against the wall. Stay calm. It'll be quicker this way. Help! Help! Clark screamed. Thomas covered his mouth with his hand. No one will hear you. The cameras are soundproof. He inserted the needle into a vein in Clark's arm and slowly pressed down on the syringe plunger. The prisoner struggled, trying to break free, but gradually his movements grew weaker. It won't hurt, Thomas said quietly. You'll just fall asleep and never wake up. Clark fell to the floor, breathing heavily and intermittently. His eyes rolled back, and his body began to convulse. Thomas stood over him and watched the man who had ruined his daughter's life die. He expected to feel satisfaction, relief, justice served. But instead, there was only emptiness in his soul. A few minutes later, Clark stopped breathing. Thomas leaned over and checked his pulse. It was gone. Now he had to stage a suicide. Thomas took a rope made of bed sheets out of his pocket. Prisoners often made such ropes for suicide. He tied one end to the ventilation grate and wrapped the other around Clark's neck. Then he lifted the body and tried to make it look like a hanging. But something went wrong. The rope was too short, and the mark from the injection on his arm was too visible. Thomas realized that the staging looked unconvincing. An experienced investigator would easily see that this was not a suicide, but it was too late to change anything. He put away the syringe and the vial, looked around the cell once more, erasing any traces of his presence. Then he quietly left and locked the door. The way back to his office seemed endless. Every step echoed in the empty corridors. Thomas expected someone to stop him, to hear an alarm go off, but the prison was asleep. In his office, he sat down at his desk and tried to concentrate on his report. But the letters blurred before his eyes. His hands were shaking, and his heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to echo throughout the building. Thomas knew he had done something irreparable. He had killed a man. He had become just like the criminals he had guarded for 25 years. But Clark deserved to die. He had ruined an innocent girl's life and had to pay for it. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Thomas left the prison. The guard on duty said goodbye to him as usual, suspecting nothing. At home, Thomas took a shower, trying to wash away the feeling of having committed a crime, but it wouldn't wash away. He knew that feeling would stay with him forever. On Sunday morning, the phone rang. It was Captain James Walker, the head of security. Mr. Bradley, I'm sorry to bother you on your day off. We've had an incident at the prison. What kind of incident? Inmate Clark was found dead in his cell. It looks like suicide. Thomas feigned shock. My God, how did this happen? He hanged himself with a rope made from bedding. The guard on duty found the body during his morning rounds. I'll be right there. No need, sir. We've already called the police and the coroner. Everything is under control. Thomas hung up and sat down in his chair. It had begun. Now there would be an investigation, questions, suspicions. He had to keep it together, play the role of the shocked prison warden. An hour later, Detective Victoria Hayes called. Thomas, have you heard about what happened to Clark? Yes, Captain Walker called. It's a terrible story. I'll need to talk to you. Standard procedure for incidents like this. Of course. When would be convenient for you? Tomorrow morning. And I'm very sorry about Thomas. What do you mean? I know how you feel about your work. Incidents like this are always difficult to deal with. After talking to the detective, Thomas called Emily. Honey, I have some news. Damon Clark is dead. A long pause. How? He committed suicide in his cell. Another pause. I don't know what to say. Should I be sad? Happy? You don't have to feel anything. Just know that he can't hurt anyone anymore. Dad, did you have something to do with this? His daughter's question hit him like a bolt of lightning. Did she suspect him? What are you talking about? You've been acting strange lately, talking about justice, about him paying. Emily, I'm a prison warden, not a murderer. I was upset that he hurt you, but that doesn't mean I'm capable of murder. I'm sorry, Dad. It's just that it all seems so strange. Thomas realized that even his own daughter was beginning to suspect him. If he couldn't convince her, he certainly couldn't convince an experienced detective. That evening, he reviewed all the details of what had happened, trying to find weaknesses in his plan. He threw the insulin vial into a garbage chute in an apartment building in another part of town. He burned the syringe in the fireplace. He washed and dried the clothes he had worn in prison. But other clues remained. Surveillance camera footage could show his movements in the prison. The electronic lock system recorded when and who opened each door. If Detective Hayes was careful enough, she would find inconsistencies. Thomas knew he hadn't committed the perfect crime. He might have left clues that would lead to his exposure, but he had no regrets. Clark got what he deserved. True, now Thomas himself had to be prepared to pay for his justice. Monday began with a call from Captain Walker at 6 in the morning. Mr. Bradley, Detective Hayes is already at the prison. She wants to examine the crime scene before you arrive. Thomas felt a pang of anxiety. Usually, investigators waited for their superiors to arrive before starting work. Okay, I'll be there in half an hour. As he got dressed, Thomas tried to prepare himself for the conversation ahead. The main thing was to act natural, like someone who was shocked by what had happened, but had nothing to do with it. Captain Walker met him at the prison with a grim expression. How's it going, James? Not great, sir. Detective Hayes is asking a lot of questions. About security, about Clark's regime, about who had access to Block C. That's normal. Standard procedure. But Thomas knew that Victoria Hayes rarely limited herself to standard procedures. The detective was waiting for him in Clark's cell. The body had already been removed, but the smell of death still hung in the air. Hayes was examining the rope the prisoner had allegedly used to hang himself. Good morning, Thomas. Victoria, terrible story. In 25 years on the job, this is the first time something like this has happened. The detective looked at him intently. Tell me about Clark. How has he been behaving lately? Normal, reading, writing letters, complaining about his health sometimes. And on Saturday night, you were here late. Thomas felt his heart skip a beat. She already knew he had been at the prison. Yes, working on a report, lots of paperwork. The guard on duty said you left around 2 in the morning. Pretty late for paperwork. You know how it is. I sat down at the computer, got carried away, and lost track of time. Victoria nodded, but Thomas could see she didn't believe him. Can I see that report? Of course. In the office, Thomas opened the file on the computer. He had indeed been working on the report on Saturday, but he had spent most of his time planning the murder. The detective scanned the document. The last save time is 11:47 p.m. What were you doing the rest of the time? Thomas tried to remain calm. Checking my email, reading new instructions from the department, routine work. Were you in the cells? No. Why? Night rounds are the duty of the staff on duty. Victoria wrote something down in her notebook. Thomas, I need to show you something. She took out her tablet and played a video from a surveillance camera. This is the corridor near cell block C, Saturday, 12:14 a.m. A blurry figure could be seen walking down the hallway. The quality of the recording was poor, but the silhouette resembled Thomas. It could be anyone, he said, trying to sound confident. Maybe, and this is the recording from 12:38. The new video showed the same figure walking in the opposite direction. 24 minutes, the detective noted. That's exactly how long it takes to get to Clark's camera and back. Thomas realized he was caught. The cameras had recorded his movements despite his attempts to avoid being seen. Victoria, I know what you're getting at, but this is absurd. Why would I kill a prisoner? I don't know. Maybe you can tell me? The detective sat down in the chair across from his desk. Thomas, I've known you for many years. You're an honest man, a good cop, but you've changed lately. You've become nervous, distracted, and your daughter has serious health problems, right? Thomas remained silent. I checked with the hospital. Emily is being treated for HIV. She was infected several months ago. That's private information. Yes, but it explains a lot. A father finds out his daughter has a terminal illness. He starts looking for someone to blame, and he finds him in his own prison. Thomas stood up from the table. You're accusing me of murder based on blurry video footage and assumptions? I'm just trying to understand what happened. But I have something else. Victoria took a transparent bag of evidence out of her bag. The electronic lock system records every time a door is opened. On Saturday at 12:16 p.m., Clark's door was opened, with your keycard. Thomas felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. He had forgotten about the electronic system they had installed 2 years ago to improve security. It's a system error, or someone used my card. Thomas, stop it. We both know the truth. The detective stood up and walked over to the window. The coroner hasn't finished the autopsy yet, but the preliminary results are interesting. Clark didn't die of suffocation. The cause of death was acute hypoglycemia. In simple terms, an insulin overdose. Thomas sat down in a chair. The game was over. The rope around his neck was an attempt at staging the scene. A rather clumsy one, by the way. You didn't take into account that hanging leaves characteristic marks, which Clark didn't have. There was a long silence. Thomas stared out the window at the gray walls of the prison that had been his life for a quarter of a century. Now he himself would become its inhabitant. He infected my daughter, he said quietly. I know. He knew about his illness and slept with her anyway. He condemned her to a life of suffering. That doesn't justify murder. It does to me. Thomas turned to the detective. He had to pay for what he did. The justice system would have allowed him to escape punishment. That's not your decision, Thomas. Whose is it? The judge who would have given him a suspended sentence? The jury who would have taken pity on a sick criminal? Victoria shook her head. You ruined your life for revenge. Think about Emily. Now she's not only sick, but she's going to lose her father. At the mention of his daughter, Thomas felt a sharp pain. Emily. He had done all this for her, and now he regretted it for her sake. Did she suspect me? Yes. She came to the station yesterday. She said she was afraid for you, that you were saying strange things about justice. Thomas closed his eyes. Even his own daughter understood what he was capable of. What will happen now? I'm going to arrest you. There will be a trial, most likely a life sentence. The detective took out a pair of handcuffs. Thomas Bradley, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Damon Clark. You have the right to remain silent. Thomas didn't listen. He thought about Emily, about how she would find out about her father's arrest, how she would live on, all alone. As he was led out of the prison in handcuffs, the officers looked at him with disbelief and shock. Thomas Bradley, an honest chief who had served the law for 25 years, had become a murderer. In the police car, Victoria said, I'm sorry, Thomas. You were a good man. I'm still a good man. I just protected my daughter the only way I could. Murder is never the only way. It is for a father. At the station, Thomas was placed in a holding cell. It was a small, cold room with an iron bunk and a toilet in the corner. Now he was on the other side of the bars. An hour later, a court-appointed lawyer arrived. He was a young man of about 30, clearly inexperienced. Mr. Bradley, I will be your defense attorney. Tell me what happened. Thomas looked at him wearily. I killed the man who ruined my daughter's life. There's enough evidence to convict me. What defense can there be? We can argue temporary insanity, emotional distress. No need. I acted deliberately and have no regrets. The lawyer tried to change his mind, but Thomas was adamant. He didn't want a humiliating trial where he would be portrayed as crazy or out of control. He had committed premeditated murder and was prepared to take responsibility. Emily arrived in the evening. Thomas hardly recognized his daughter. She had aged years in just a few days. Her eyes were red from crying, and her face was gaunt. Dad, why did you do it? They sat on opposite sides of a glass partition, talking through a telephone receiver. For you, sweetheart. I didn't ask you to kill him. I couldn't let him get away with it. Emily began to cry. Now I've lost him and you. I have no one left. Those words hurt more than any sentence. Emily, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing would have been to stay with me, support me, help me get through my illness, not turn into a murderer. His daughter stood up, ready to leave. "Emily, wait." "What, Dad?" "I love you, more than life itself." "I know, but love shouldn't turn into hate." After she left, Thomas lay down on the hard cot and stared at the ceiling. He had gotten his revenge, but he had lost everything he had lived for. Clark was dead, but his own life was ruined. The trial took place 3 months later. Thomas pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The jury returned a guilty verdict after half an hour of deliberation. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. "Mr. Bradley," said the judge, "you served the law for 25 years. That makes your crime all the more serious. You betrayed the trust of society and became the very evil you fought against." Thomas listened to the sentence in silence. Emily was sitting in the courtroom, but she did not look at her father. He was sent to a maximum security prison 200 miles from Millhaven. Ironically, he had now become a prisoner of the very system to which he had dedicated his life. In prison, Thomas was treated with suspicion. Former law enforcement officers were always in danger among prisoners, but gradually he found his place in the prison hierarchy. Emily visited him once a month for the first year. Then the visits became less frequent. She told him about her work, her treatment, her attempts to build a new life. But a wall grew between them that could not be broken down. 2 years later, Emily married a doctor from the hospital where she worked. Thomas found out about it in a letter. She wrote that her husband knew about her illness and was willing to live with it. "I have found someone who loves me for who I am," she wrote. "You shouldn't have killed for my happiness. You should have just believed that I would find him myself." Thomas read that letter hundreds of times. Emily was right. He had ruined 2 lives, Clark's and his own, for revenge that brought happiness to no one. 5 years passed. Thomas became a librarian in the prison library. He read a lot, thought about life, about the choices that had led him here. He understood that if he had been given a second chance, he would have done things differently. But there was no second chance. He would spend the rest of his life in a cell, paying for the moments of rage that had destroyed everything. Emily no longer visited him. The last letter came 3 years ago. She announced the birth of a daughter, a granddaughter Thomas would never see. Sometimes in the evenings, he thought about what he would say to Clark if he could talk to him. Maybe he really loved Emily and didn't want to hurt her. Maybe he himself was suffering from what he had done. But it was too late for remorse. Thomas Bradley, who had upheld the law for 25 years, had become a lawbreaker. A father who wanted to protect his daughter had lost her forever. Justice had prevailed, but not the kind he had sought. It was the kind that catches up with everyone who thinks they have the right to decide the fate of others. In a small cell in a maximum security prison, Thomas Bradley spent his days thinking about the price of revenge and how true love should not turn into hatred.